Wisconsin Eye is continuing with its Campaign 2010 conversation this week, a few days after Governor Doyle announced he would not seek a third term. And our guest today and right now, Milwaukee County Executive Scott Walker. Thank you very much.
Good to be here.
You were the
Good
first.
To talk to you again,
you were the.
Steve.
Thank you.
After
you
all
were,
those years in the capital.
I know. You were the first Republican to officially announce, weren't you?
That's right. April 28th.
April 28th.
I was not satisfied with where the state was headed. I'm not any more satisfied, sadly, today. And so our focus is the same as it was on April 28th.
Well, that's my first
jobs.
question. How have things changed since 11 a.m. Monday when Governor Doyle said no third term?
Yeah, clearly the circumstances, the characters will change in all this. But I think in terms of a message, my message doesn't change. I mean, I've been all around the state. We've traveled thousands of miles from Superior to Delavan, where I grew up as a kid, from Wauwatosa, where I live, all the way up to Door County and Rhinelander and everywhere in between. People are scared about jobs. Which is what we've talked about when we got in the race, and it's not going to change because Jim Doyle's not running again.
But doesn't it remove your biggest target, Scott?
Well, in a way it does in terms of some of the personal issues, but what we've found, even over the last 2 months, I spend less and less of my time talking about Jim Doyle and more time talking about solutions. What I've found is increasingly, and I think this is probably true nationally as well, that people get it, that we're in an economic disaster. They know we're in a crisis time right now in the state economically. They know it nationally. And what they're tired of is people pointing fingers at who's to blame, and instead they want leaders who are going to point to solutions. And so we've tried to talk more and more about that. I think that opens the door to an opportunity we have now with an open field to say, who's going to get out of this crisis? We've got the track record. We've done it. Arguably, we've had circumstances as difficult in Milwaukee County when I first came in as what the state faces today. And we're the only candidate, Republican or Democrat, who's got the track record of doing something about it.
Our leaders in Washington, Scott, including Bernanke of the Federal Reserve, are saying, it looks like we've hit bottom. Do you believe that?
Well, I hope so. I mean, as an American first and as someone who cares about this country, certainly cares about the state, I hope so. But when I talk to small business owners, mid-sized business owners, when I talk to community bankers, when I talk to particularly people in construction and home building, they're still hunkering down. They're still worried. And if that's the early sign in the national and global economy that things are starting to happen, I hope so. But again, I don't see the signs out in the street, at least not in Main Street.
Scott, one of the reasons that Wisconsin and I wanted to get you in as soon as possible after the governor's announcement is, do you consider yourself the front runner in the on the GOP side?
I ran track in high school at Delaware High School, and I always loved to come around that last curve and hook it and come out to win. So that meant I had to be a little bit behind the leader. Whether I'm a front runner or not, I'm in it through November 2nd of 2010. We're in it not just to win the election, but to start winning again for Wisconsin, get us back on track. What that makes me in terms of our campaign organization, our fundraising ability, but most importantly our message, I'll leave it to guys like you to determine what the official title is. But we think we're in great shape. Certainly we think part of the reason, not the only reason, the governor got out. I think part of it was his poll numbers, part of it was this tough budget he went through. But I got to think a month ago when the finance report came out for the first 6 months of 2009, we not only outraised a sitting governor during the middle of a budget cycle by over $200,000, I think the thing that probably got their attention the most was we had 10,500 donations in 6 months. 75% of those donations came from people who gave me $50 or less, which means it's not just a campaign, it's a movement. And I think it's a movement based on the idea that they're not satisfied with the Doyle-Lawton policies that we've seen over the last 4 and 8 years. They want somebody new, they want somebody innovative, they bought into the message, and we're going to keep pushing that.
As a result of Governor Doyle's announcement, there are all kinds of Republicans who are saying, I'm considering it, don't count me out, don't cross off my name. Representative Paul Ryan's the only one who said, I'm not in it. Right. But I was reading the name of businessman Tim Michels. Do you think he'll get in?
Honestly, I don't know. I mean, I honestly don't know. In the end, for us, I don't care if there's 1 or 100 candidates, Republican and Democrat alike. Our focus is going to be like a laser beam, not just on November 2nd, but on what we need to do to get the state working again. When I ran for county executive, huge pension scandal, huge financial troubles, major deficit in county government, both morally and financially. We came with a clear plan, and we focused on what we were going to do when we got in office. The voters responded to that. I think the same thing's here. We can't focus or worry about what other personalities might be out there. We've got to focus on spending the next year and less than 3 months, listening to the people of Wisconsin, having a conversation about their concerns and needs. But what I'm hearing overwhelmingly is it's jobs, and they want a leader who's going to do something about getting the state working.
Scott, you just said you're in it no matter who else is in it. Is that also true if former Governor Thompson would get in?
Absolutely.
Really?
I don't care if Brett Favre or anybody else gets in. In the end, my focus is not, unlike people who've started talking about this after Monday's announcement, I'm not in this because I want a job or I think my chances are better or worse. I was in this from the beginning because I've been in the trenches over the last 7 years taking on a job that nobody else said a Republican could take on. There's never been a Republican elected to the office I hold in Milwaukee County. I've been elected there 3 times. The last time was 60% in a county that went almost 2/3 for Barack Obama in the last election. I think the reason we did that is not because of anything magical. It's because we had a clear agenda. We had a reform agenda, a fiscally restrained agenda, and an agenda about limited government and economic opportunity. That resonated not only with Republicans and independents, but also with what I call discerning Democrats. And in the same way as I was 7 years ago, I'm fed up with where the state's going, not with the people. You know, one of the great things about traveling is I've found our people and our employers, our people in our places are outstanding. We got some of the best work ethic out there. We've got 3-4 generation employers, family businesses that want to stay here and grow here in Wisconsin. It's some of the best natural resources in the world. What is failing us is not our people, our places. What's failing us is our state government. And if we have the right leadership, not just the right governor, but the right leadership in there, we can get this state working again. So whoever's in, in the next few months really doesn't matter to me. It's about that message.
Is your statement that I'm in it no matter who else is, isn't that in effect asking Tommy, please don't run?
Well, I don't think he's going to. I mean, it's not a plea. I think Tommy, much like Brett, is a legend. He knows how to win. He's a great guy. I love him. He's a good friend. In many ways, he's a mentor to me. But I think in the end, the way I've talked to him previously, he's a guy who's doing quite well in the private sector. He's enjoying life as it is. The best way for him to see his legacy, the legacy of welfare reform, education reform, fiscal restraint, effectively using the line item veto to cut out wasteful government spending, the best way to see that live on is to support someone like me because I've got that experience. I've used a line item veto. I've controlled spending. I was an advocate for welfare reform and school choice, and I'd like to see us not only go back to those good things from the past, but rather I'd like to take that and use it as a platform to dream even bigger about how much greater and how much more of a national leader we could be on reform in the future.
What's your assessment of the potential Dem field in the wake of Governor Doyle's announcement? The Lawton, the Kynes, the Falks, the Erpenbachs?
For me, in the end, I think it's going to be wide open. I wouldn't be surprised if you didn't see 2 or 3 other names out there that aren't even on the radar right now.
Who's?
I don't know. I mean, that's the great unknown. I mean, it's one of those, a wide open race. First time we've had since Lee Sherman Dreyfus, my good friend, decided not to run for re-election in 1982.
He announced that in April of 82.
Yeah, he announced it
really late for his party.
He announced it late, and that's the last time we've had any opportunity to have a wide open race for governor. I think anything's possible. You could have a business person on either Republican or Democrat side. You could have a media personnel. You could have almost anybody. Again, for us, we'll let the media outlets and the pundits decide who's in, who's out, and whether or not that's good, bad, or indifferent.
Earlier you used the term Doyle Lawton, but it's no secret that the governor and the lieutenant governor have not been close. Mm-hmm. Is it fair to hang the Doyle governorship around her neck?
I think it's fair to take the poor public policy that is killing jobs in the state and attach it to Jim Doyle, to Barbara Lawton, to Ron Kyne, to any other candidate on the Democrat side who says they may be running for governor until they denounce the things that they don't like about this governor and his budget.
What's the downside about Ron Kyne since he's working in Washington?
Well, my point is, I have said, and I believe even other Republicans have said, these are the things that we would undo. The damage that Jim Doyle has done with this budget in particular, the $3 billion when you combine this year's budget combined with a move they passed in February, $3 billion, the sorts of things like combined reporting that cost Harley-Davidson Motor Company $22.5 million, which in turn, 2 weeks later, cost 400 frontline workers in Harley-Davidson their jobs with a pink slip. Those are the things I'm committed to undo that damage. I'm committed to cutting taxes. I'm committing to get us back to a point where we don't let convicted felons out early, where we go back to the welfare reform we passed on a bipartisan basis in the 1990s under Tommy's leadership. Those are all things that Jim Doyle has taken the opposite approach on. And until any of the other Democrat candidates tell us what they would do differently, what they would undo from that negative legacy, not only for jobs, but for reform and good government. To me, they're party to that policy just without the name ID of the current governor.
Have you and your campaign advisors retooled your campaign in what I'll call the post-Doyle era?
No, I mean, honestly, it's April 28th when I was in Wauwatosa, when I was in Green Bay, when I was in Altoona outside of Eau Claire, when I was in Rothschild outside of Owasso, or just up the way in Dane at the Henry's Farm announcing our campaign, we talked about jobs. It was about jobs, reform. It's about economic opportunity, limited government, restoring personal freedoms. It's the same thing I said then, I'm saying today, and I'll say every day between now and November 2nd, 2010. Doesn't matter who the candidates are.
In his statement, Monday, the governor listed some specific things he was proud of achieving in the last 18 months. I want to ask you about just a few of these. And the question I want to ask you, if you were governor, would you have signed him? He said he's very proud of expanding health care for children, 130,000 new enrollees in Badger Care Plus in the last 18 months. Is that a good thing? Would you have signed it?
I don't know about the specific version. I think health care is a good thing. I think the private sector should be a greater partner, not just in the kids, but in the larger sense of any health care plan we take on, assuming the federal government doesn't take it away from us over the next year and a half. I think it's got to be a partnership. I think the role for state government is more in pushing transparency, things like lifting the state tax and health savings accounts, and in turn allowing private sector partners to step up and help fill in the gaps, particularly for small and mid-sized businesses.
He also said he was proud to sign into law the abolishing of the QEO, which you and I know had limited teacher pay and fringe benefit raises. Would you have signed that?
No, absolutely not.
You would have vetoed it.
I think that is going to be devastating both to public education. I was just talking to the school board president Fond du Lac the other day. I've talked to school board members all across the state, the superintendents and others. This will have a devastating impact on education in Wisconsin because the legislature and the governor did nothing to address per pupil spending caps. If you don't do that, what essentially happens is more money goes into wage and benefit packages, less money goes into the classroom. For anybody who calls themselves pro-education, you combine that with about a $300 million cut to public schools in this state, it is a devastating blow for them. I think instead you actually need to not only keep or maintain something like the QEO in the state to affect wage and benefit packages for school employees. I think you need to have that for public sector employees, period. The one complaint I've heard over the years from friends of mine who are teachers is that why is it just single out teachers? I think that's a valid argument. Mediation arbitration, I know as elected official at the local level, is a huge challenge. You know, at a time like now when everybody else across the state is tightening their belts, most employers are lucky to keep the number of employees, if not lay them off. Most employees are happy to just have a job if that means no wage increase, maybe even minor adjustments in their health care. Mediation arbitration forces most county and municipal governments to look at 3-4+ % increases. That's outrageous. That's got to change. I would take it to the opposite approach. If you're ever going to get spending under control in state and local government, you've got to have wage and benefits that are really comparable, even with union workforces in the private sector. I think that's one of those complete disconnect. The people who pay the bill are paying much more for health care. They're seeing a much different benefit package than the people who are getting the benefit of the taxpayers' dollars. We got to even that out.
He also said he was proud to have signed the smoking ban. Would you have signed it?
No.
You would not have.
I don't like smoking. I'm not a smoker, but I believe in personal freedom. You come to my house, I'm going to ask you to smoke outside off my property. If my neighbor wants to smoke, that's up to him. To me, the same thing goes. What's the next step? Do I tell people they can't have hamburgers because it might cause you to be slightly overweight? To me, I don't like the government being involved. I certainly think there's great ways to encourage people to be more healthy, but I think outright mandates are a problem.
He also took pride for being able to, he recommended in February, the registry for same-sex couples. Would you have signed that?
No, it's a violation of the state constitution.
So you believe?
I think it is clear-cut. I think J.B. Van Hollen is absolutely correct. The voters, 1.25 million voters 4 years ago or 3 years ago, back in 2006, signed off by voting for a constitutional amendment. I was one of those who voted for that. It very clearly said that marriage is between one man and one woman, and not a variation of that. But it also extended it further and put in additional language that talked about you can't substitute something close to that to get around that. That's essentially what these benefits are that we're passing.
Just
the budget.
A couple more things.
And I think it's probably frankly, part of the reason why he was advised to that, I think, is directly linked to the fact that he had an attorney, sadly, who was not licensed to practice in Wisconsin, probably got poor advice on that one.
Just a few more things that, and the reason I'm asking about these is they were cited by the governor in his announcement. He said he was proud that beginning November 1, health insurance companies will have to provide intensive treatment to autistic children. Would you have signed that?
Again, I have to look at the particulars of that. I think it's certainly, I want to work with families who have kids with autistic children on a variety of different things. Mandates in general are a concern to me, but I'd have to look at the specifics.
Now, turning the corner, I just want to ask you about a couple issues that he said he's going to work on for the next 15 months. And he also said he's not going to leave early. Do you believe that?
I believe it.
Okay. One of the issues he said, in fact, he ended it, one of my goals is to connect Chicago, Milwaukee, Madison with high-speed passenger rail. Where do you stand on that issue?
To me, spending $47 million, $47.5 million for a 2-train set at a time when we have potholes across the state of Wisconsin in all parts of the state just seems to be an incredible disconnect with where our transportation priorities are. If we're going to make the state grow, it all goes back to jobs. If we're going to get this economy going, we've got to have a transportation system that connects all parts of the state of Wisconsin. I'm going to put my dollars there first. An
issue emerged in your back door just last week that intrigues me. I'm asking your position on it. Should the mayor of Milwaukee name the MPS superintendent?
You know, that's one I've looked in the past. That something's got to happen. There's got to be a shakeup. My preference would be, I think you need to divide the school district up into smaller districts. I think 100,000 kids is too big of a district. I think that might be a better approach to look at smaller, more community-based school districts. It works effectively in other parts of the state of Wisconsin. That would be my preference.
You have repeatedly criticized Governor Doyle in terms of the budget deficit and how he'd solve it. But Milwaukee County has its own problems, and the Democrats say that they call you a failed leader. Do you want to talk to your approach about your county's deficit?
Absolutely. We came in, if you look in 2002, my record compared to Governor Doyle, debt went up in the state, our debt went down 10%. Their bond rating was dropped, we stabilized our bond rating. Their workforce, in fact, in the last 12 months, we've lost 114,000 private sector jobs in the state of Wisconsin. During the same time period, we've added 1,100 jobs in state government, county government. Over the past 7 years, we reduced our workforce on the taxpayer side of what's subsidized by over 20%. I've done 7 straight budgets. I'll do my 8th in just a month without a tax levy increase from the previous year. Obviously, the governor's put forward some of the biggest tax increases ever. And in particular, I think the best test is last year, we ended up with a slight surplus. At the same time, the state government had the largest budget deficit ever and the 4th largest in the entire country. I think the record's very clear. And other things they criticize us on, they point to parks and transit, other issues like that. Our park system is literally up in October, one of the finalists for the best park system in the country. We have used resources. Just because we don't put more tax levy in doesn't mean that we haven't found other ways to support our park system, either through contracting out for services or, more often than not, partnering with the private sector to get the job done. In the same way, transit system, when measured in an audit compared to its peers, is one of the top transit systems in the country for comparable transit systems out there. Our record is clear. I'll take my record and defend it any day.
But I want to come back to the transit issue because I just watched it as it played in the last budget. It split the lawmakers from Milwaukee County. It was really tough. Sales tax increase, part of which should go to Milwaukee County. Your position on that?
I oppose it.
On the bus system?
I oppose it. To me, the last thing I want to do when it comes back, everything's about jobs. The last thing I want to do is make Milwaukee County a tax island. Racine and Waukesha County already do not have a sales tax. Milwaukee County has a 0.5%. They passed in 1991. They passed it at the time claiming it was for property tax relief. In the 10 years that followed, property taxes went up 55%. Property tax increases didn't slow down until I got into office. Like I said, I've done 7 straight without a tax levy increase. Used my veto to try and override some of the increases the county board put into place. I think if you want to attract business, if you want to retain jobs and attract new jobs, whether it's to Milwaukee County where I live and am in office now or to the state of Wisconsin, you can't make the county nor the state a tax island.
What's going to be left of the transit system in the state's largest county without some type of a tax increase, Scott?
Oh, I think this budget, you'll see, we'll still effectively continue. We're not going to reduce routes. We're going to actually add 2 new services for what's called bus rapid transit. BRT is commonly referred to, a very successful program elsewhere in the country. It has all the nuances and improvements of a rail-based system, but with a rubber-tired system so that it's adaptable and much more cost-effective. We're just trying to be innovative. We're not stuck in the old status quo of the past that you got to do things the same way with the same resources. We're putting in place new bus rapid transit buses. We're using our capital budget to put in place new, more cost-effective, more fuel-efficient buses. And so we think we can do it. Unlike the typical Milwaukee politician, who I think in the past has asked for more money without accountability and more help from the state, I've said just the opposite. I said, I don't want to raise taxes, I want to lower them. I want more accountability for the things I have, and I don't need more money from the state government. I need more flexibility to do things differently. That's the same thing I'd like to bring into my experience as governor and say, again, we don't need to have more money from the taxpayers. They're already oversoaked. Individual taxpayers, business taxpayers, if we want to really stimulate the economy, we got to put more money in the hands of the people and employers that make the state work, not in the hands of the government. And you got to have somebody who's willing to do that.
The only other announced GOP candidate is former Congressman Mark Newman. Where do you and he disagree?
On issues, I'm not familiar. I mean, he's just started, so at some point there'll probably be some issue down the line, but I don't know of any specific difference. Again, I spend my time focused entirely on November. I'm focusing on jobs and things that'll get the state moving again, and I really don't spend a lot of time concentrating on him or any other Republican.
You don't want to answer the question why you would be better than he is the GOP nominee?
I'd tell you, not just for him, I'd tell you why I think I'm a better prospect for anybody in the race, Republican or Democrat. A lot of people can talk about ideas, they can talk about how they voted for him. I'm the only candidate out there who is the chief executive of a large-scale government, has delivered on the promises that I made to hold the line on lower taxes, to put in place limited government, more freedom to individuals, and most importantly, a program that encourages more business, more job opportunities out there. If people want limited government, economic opportunity, financial restraint, and ultimately more of their freedoms restored, you can believe everybody else who's got a nice flyer, or you can look at somebody who's delivered on those promises, arguably in a state or in a county that is in a more dire straits when we came in than proportion of the state of Wisconsin is right now.
What are the benchmark goals for your campaign from here? Judge the voters should judge your campaign by what over the next 6, 9, 12 months?
I think foremost over the next 6 months to years, how well we listen. I think one of the biggest mistakes the typical politician makes is coming out and talking at people instead of listening. God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. We should use them in that proportion. So over the next 6 months and beyond, we're going to spend the majority of our time certainly talking about general concepts that we have, but spending the majority of our time listening. Whether it's in large groups, whether it's breaking down by categories, we're going to spend a fair amount of time. So people say, one, is he listening? Hopefully we've shown we're already doing that and will in the future. Secondly, is he addressing issues that are of concern to me in my area? So we're going to spend a lot of time at nights, on the weekends, and beyond, traveling the state. We've done a lot of that already, but talking to people, hearing their ideas, addressing issues, many of which are very regionally based. And then finally, I'd say close to a year from now, when the time is right, after we've listened, after we've traveled, after we've communicated and had a conversation with the people of the state, then ultimately, what is the plan? I don't think it's enough to say you're for more jobs. I think you've got to spell it out, tell the voters what that means, and we're going to have a concrete plan. Just as you remember when I first ran for county executive, I had a big card that I handed $500,000 out, and I said, put this up on a refrigerator, hold me accountable for it. We're going to make that same sort of concrete pledge to the voters, not just the win, but what I liked about it when I did it before, why I'd like to do something like that in the future is it's a roadmap. Everybody knows where you're going, everybody knows what you're headed for, and you can use it as a way not to veer off and go off to things that aren't as important. So
you were satisfied with your campaign on Saturday prior to knowing that Governor Doyle would make his announcement, and you're just as satisfied 1 week later?
Absolutely. Again, we've got thousands of volunteers. We've got people have gone to scottwalker.org and signed up on our website. There's this interactive group called My Scott Spot. We're on Facebook and Twitter and all the other things out there. We're having a very effective grassroots campaign, which is even, as I mentioned before, reflected in our fundraising because people believe in the message. It's not about, this campaign has never been about Jim Doyle. It's never been about me. It's always been about all of us in the state of Wisconsin who care deeply, who believe in the state, who are vested here, who have kids here. We want our kids to stay here after college. We want to retire here someday. We love this state, but ultimately we're scared about where the future is headed. It's about addressing those concerns, getting us an optimistic, positive message about how we're going to get the state working, not just for jobs, but working effectively for all the people of the state to come. And I think that's a message that wins.
Scott, thank you very much.
Good to be with the state.
Our guest today has been Milwaukee County Executive Scott Walker, who was the first Republican to announce his campaign for governor, and we'll be talking often.
Good to be with you.
Thank you.